Heavenly Father, today we put on the full armor to protect us against attack. We put on the belt of truth to protect against lies and deception. We put on the breastplate of righteousness to protect our hearts from the temptations. We put on the gospel of peace on our feet to walk in your light, peace and freedom with Holy Spirit. We rebuke anxious thoughts. We take up your shield of faith for protection to block and destroy all the darts and threats thrown at us by the enemy. We put on the helmet of salvation to cover our minds and thoughts, reminding us that we are children of a mighty King. We are forgiven, set free, saved by the blood of Jesus. We take up the sword of the Spirit, your living word, that has the power to demolish strongholds and is sharper than any double-edged sword. We come to you, Lord, in daily prayer. In Jesus' mighty name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
And what's up, you guys? I'm your host, Emma from The Imagination, and today I am teaming up once again with Becky and Bridget from the Save Our Children podcast for a combo episode featuring Janae Sergio, mother, wife, philanthropist, author of her memoir, Perfectly Flawed, fashion entrepreneur, social media motivator, combat Navy military vet, war survivor, and human trafficking survivor, among so many other things. Janae is a true all-around inspiration, not only with what she's overcome, but with the beautiful ways she has turned her pain into a superpower. Having grown up in a dysfunctional home, she overcame overwhelming obstacles by the time she was a legal adult, including homelessness. And the fact that she's standing here with us today is an absolute miracle from God himself. A hero in so many ways, she was one of the first to be sent into the 9/11 World Trade Center after the events of that day took place, and she now spends her time advocating for military vets, children, and human trafficking survivors and victims. You are going to learn so much from this episode, and I suggest giving your full attention to Janae, who is blessing us with her time and her miraculous story. So, without further ado, please help us in welcoming woman of God, voice for the voiceless, all-around inspiration, hero, and role model, Janae Sergio. Janae, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's our honor. We were so excited to have you on. I know it's been a long time coming, and thank you, Bridget, of course, for making all these connections. Bridget's definitely the incredible connector of this circle, so we're really honored to have you. And I know you have a really amazing social media following. I'm so happy to see that so many people are actually getting on board with taking interest in learning about topics such as the life experiences that you had. But for our listeners, maybe who aren't too familiar with your story, why don't we just do a brief background, maybe starting at your childhood, and we'll spend the rest of the conversation leading up to where you are today with this incredible story that you have.
Thank you. I did want to clarify, I just want to say that was a beautiful intro. I appreciate it. I wanted to just clarify that I didn't go into the trade centers. I actually went to Operation Enduring Freedom right after 9/11. So
Gotcha.
Yeah, I don't want to take away from those who did run into the World Trade Center, but thank you for the beautiful intro. So I come from a very dysfunctional family. My mom came from a dysfunctional family herself as well. And unfortunately, rather than have more of a survivor mindset, she had kind of a victim mindset, and she ended up passing that dysfunction on to my sisters and myself a little bit more than them. I grew up in a home with verbal abuse, physical abuse, and neglect. As I started to get into my teenage years, I started to kind of go to church and see how other families were living and question the life that we were having. And it just caused more problems for me at home because I was realizing that what we were experiencing was not normal. As I spoke up and spoke out about it, the abuse actually got worse. Into my early teens, my mom either would shift me around to people's homes to try to kind of push me off to other people. And then when she realized I was actually enjoying my time in their homes, she would bring me back so that I couldn't really enjoy my teenage years. I think she was hoping that it wouldn't go well for me. But then there were times where I would just, run away. I think it was like 2 times that I ran away from home to try to avoid the abuse or escape the abuse. One of the times that I ran away was when I was 16 years old to escape her abuse, and I ended up actually being sexually assaulted. And that was my first sexual experience. My mom told me that I was now a statistic, and she said that I was lying about it and that I was saying that I had been assaulted because she thought that I didn't want the church to be mad at me. And she took me to a homeless shelter in Hollywood, California, and dropped me off. And so that led to me being homeless in Hollywood, California for the next 2.5 years until I joined the Navy. And that's where I ended up serving for 8 years. I was one of the first to be shipped off to Operation Enduring Freedom right after 9/11. Spent about 7.5 months at sea, and went on to just build a beautiful life from that point on.
Thank you for sharing that. But as much, I know that I've read the book and I can't wait to talk more about it. But for everyone listening, also make sure to grab her book, Perfectly Flawed. And it's such an amazing book because Janae walks you through literally her life and breaks it down to where it's very palatable. But I want to also back up in your journey as far as you being homeless, and that is in Hollywood. That is huge to overcome at such a young age, and you could have went down a different path, and human trafficking and the luring and grooming. So if we can back up along your journey, I know that there's multiple attempts where the luring and the grooming in that aspect in your book, you go into so many stories. And I loved how you were so transparent, because so many people are like, well, this doesn't happen in my community. This would never happen to me. So I love how you break it down and you openly talk about those experiences and what grooming and what all of that aspect looks like, because most people don't know that they're in those types of relationships or being groomed. So if we back up to even like the homelessness part and the luring, because you could have gone down a dark path of drugs and the sex trafficking and so many different routes, and you didn't allow yourself to be, you're at survival mode at that point. So if we can share some of those experiences, as far as like, even I know in the book you talk about the first guy you were talking, the one guy you were talking to, and then led to a sex shop.
Yes. So actually, when I first arrived in Hollywood, it was like the first day that I got there, I met a girl who had already been lured into sex trafficking, and she was already living in the cycle. So especially in Hollywood, California, the cycle is, you're either lured into drug abuse or you're lured into sex trafficking, but both of them eventually start to kind of coincide, and it becomes a cycle that you can't get out of. Either you're addicted and you use sex work to pay for your drugs, or you're lured into trafficking and you need the drugs to kind of numb yourself. And so it just becomes a vicious cycle that you can't get out of. And so I met the girl when I first got there, and she explained to me the situation that she was in. And as I was looking at her, I could see, her body was just completely broken down. She was extremely thin and frail. She had scabs all over her body. And she was really heavily addicted. And she kind of pleaded with me and was like, please, whatever you do, don't let yourself fall into this cycle. And I knew in that moment that I was going to have to be my own hero. There was no way I was going to fall into that. And I knew that all of my decisions were going to have to really align with the fact that I did not want to fall into that lifestyle. No matter how desperate I got, I needed to make sure that I didn't fall into any of the traps. I didn't expect the traps to be so difficult to identify. So one of the examples that I kind of give in the book is I was living in a night shelter. So the night shelter is kind of an emergency shelter where you have to get in line at night and wait to see if there's a bed available. Because I hadn't been homeless prior to me being dropped off there, I had a strict curfew. I broke my curfew one night and I ended up getting kicked out of that shelter. So I had nowhere to sleep. So I would just walk up and down Hollywood Boulevard at night looking for well-lit areas so that I could not necessarily hide predators, but be in the light so that predators couldn't attack me. During the day, I would go to the free clinic and we could take a shower there, and I would just take naps in the waiting room of the free clinic. And I felt safe there because there was a security guard. So over time, the security guard actually ended up taking a liking to me. I was 16 years old. He was in his 20s, handsome guy, very handsome guy. And I felt, wow, like this guy's taking an interest in me. And I had been abandoned. And so it felt really nice to have somebody actually interested in me and care about my well-being and my safety. He spent a lot of time walking with me up and down Hollywood Boulevard. He gave me gifts. He would give me like a watch and a CD player and just all kinds of gifts. He seemed really interested in my life and more specifically interested in my routine. And I remember even at one point he was walking with me, and there's a shelter in Hollywood. It's called My Friend's Place. Actually, Miley Cyrus made it famous well after I used to visit it there. But my Friend's Place is a day shelter. So you just go there during the daytime. They're only open for a couple hours and you can get resources. So I remember one of the times we were walking by there, and you could tell that he was like kind of sketchy about being seen by the staff there. So he kind of wanted to like get out of the way and just let me go on my way inside of the shelter. And it kind of was a little off for me at that time. And I didn't realize why he was that way. After a little while of us getting to know each other, he invited me to his second job, and that was a porn shop right in the middle of Hollywood Boulevard. So people walk up and down Hollywood Boulevard, with their cameras, taking pictures and enjoying the scenery, not realizing that these types of things are happening right there in those shops. So he takes me into the porn shop, and I was kind of scared when he first invited me in because I was too young. I wasn't allowed inside of a porn shop. I wasn't 18 years old. But since he worked there, he was like, you can come inside, don't worry about it. And it was my first time being inside. So I'm looking around and I'm just like, all the stuff that I'm seeing is just weird to me. Like I'm in kind of like uncomfortable and not sure what to do. He takes me to the back of the shop, and there's glass panes and there's girls dancing behind the panes. And you can see there's, seats for people to put money through and to make their demands. And he tried to kind of, talk it up and make me think that, you'll be protected. You'll be behind the glass pane. Nobody can touch you. Look, you're going to make a lot of money. And really, you could change your story, because he knew my story. He had spent some time with me, getting to know me. So he had already kind of gained that trust for me. He understood what I needed. I needed, money. I needed opportunities to change my story. I needed safety and security, which he was promising if I worked in that shop. As I was standing there, I'm looking at the girls, and they don't look happy. They don't look like people who have changed their story. They don't look like they're living a lavish lifestyle. They looked very unhappy and even maybe like incoherent, like they were on drugs. And I was like, this is not for me. I, got really uncomfortable, and I had to kind of find a way to get out of there. And I was a little scared at that point of, making him angry at me. So I just kind of made up an excuse that I had to get back before I missed curfew. And I definitely didn't have anywhere to stay if I didn't get out of there. So he let me go. I never went back to the free clinic after that. I never talked to him directly again after that, although I saw him a lot because he was kind of a staple in Hollywood on the boulevard. Everybody knew him. That was like the last time with him. However, and I think I talk in the book later about like a random encounter where I saw him was like 15 years after being in Hollywood, I ran into him. But a couple other things that I talk about as far as like the attempts to lure me in was, so this was a more blatant attempt of, not blatant, but a little bit more of a direct attempt from the person who was probably going to control my life if I had accepted that opportunity. However, once I got up to one of the transitional living houses, it's a house for teenagers from the age of 14 to 18 years old. Now, let me just clarify that these predators, they understand what at-risk youth are, and they understand the vulnerabilities, and they understand that these are youth that people may not go looking for if they disappear. And so they place themselves in and around these shelters, in and around these clinics, in and around areas where we are at getting our resources, because that's how they're able to gain our trust and move in. So I was up in this shelter, and it's for 14 to 18 years old, and it's a transitional living house, which is, it's a little bit different from a group home in that you have counselors that work there, but they're not like parental guardian type counselors. They're just helping you to develop independent living skills so that you can then kind of grow out of the system and eventually take care of yourself. That if you have a job, you have to save money, you have to cook for yourself. We all had to kind of clean. So as we're living in that house, there's a girl who lived there, and she was well into the sex trafficking industry. She had a pimp. She was honest about that with us. She was on drugs, and she would try to convince me to work with her. So first she tried to convince me to strip, and she would say, you know, things like, you'll make a lot of money. She would show us all the stuff that she had, you know, her new phones, her at that time pager, all the new things that she was getting, jewelry, whatever it was, to try to kind of show us like what we could have if we did it. And then she, you know, obviously I was like, I'm not going to strip. So she was like, well, you could be an escort. And I'm like, I don't want to be an escort. And she's like, well, you could be a high-end escort, which means you just go on dates and you don't, there's no touching. No, they're not allowed to touch you. And I was like, well, that doesn't even make sense to me. So like, I just didn't understand what she was trying to ask me to do. I just kept saying, no, I'm not interested. I'm not interested. My thought when I was listening to her try to like lure me in, and I call her a mule. She was placed in that home so that she could lure people that were living there in. So I believe that she was strategically placed there by these, the traffickers. And so as I'm looking at her, I'm thinking, okay, so you're telling me that if I do what you're doing, I will be able to change my story for the better. Yet here you are living in the same home as me. It's not making sense. Not to mention, she would come home at night and she would be crying. She would be hysterical. She would have bruises on her face. And she would tell us stories about experiences that she had with her clients those nights. And that was just traumatic for me to watch. And I'm like, I don't want that for myself. So she wasn't able to lure me in that way directly. And so as time kind of went on, she came to me and was like, okay, I understand you don't want to do any of that work, but my pimp just opened a shop on Hollywood Boulevard, and we need people to work. All you would have to do is sell stuff. You don't have to do anything else. And I'm like, all right, let's give this a try. You know, still trying to change my story, trying to get a job. So I'm like, you know, if this is an actual shop, then I'll go down there and work with you. So I get down there. The first couple of times, like, he didn't even open the shop. And I'm thinking, like, you know, this is a store on Hollywood Boulevard. You're not even opening it. And it was it's called a head shop, but it's basically where they sell pipes and bongs and, you know, tobacco products is what they called them. And so I get in there and I get behind the counter, and he kind of shows me how to do my work. And as I'm working, she's in the back performing sex work, like in that store. So people are coming in, they're going in the back, and her pimp are back there doing drugs and performing sex work. And she's doing it with him as well. And so I'm in the front, like uncomfortable, you know, and I can hear it. It's not quiet back there. It's not even an actual room. It's just like a partition. And so I remember, you know, a couple times they would come out and they'd both be completely stoned, and they would try to convince me to do drugs and to go in the back with them. And I remember one time they came out and they tried to convince me. The guy was nasty, like he was slimy. It was just, you know, and not that it would have made a difference if he was attractive, but still, it was just like, And I remember one of the times they came out and they really tried to convince me to go back there with them. And I was like, I said, no, I'm not interested. And I ended up telling them I'm quitting. I'm not going to work here anymore. And I remember hearing her as they were walking back, like, see, I told you she wasn't going to do it. So they were basically employing me with the intent of, again, trying to lure me into that work. And, you know, it just makes me think about, you know, when you go to these touristy towns and you see these shops, you know, you walk through them and you're like, how does this store survive in such an expensive area? Well, it's what's sometimes going on in the back of the store that's really making the money.
Yeah. Well, I just have to first commend you because again, like Bridget and my boys and Bridget's daughter, they're 12, 13, 14. You were barely older than those kids, and my kids can barely make themselves a meal. So like the fact that
Same.
you like the fact that you survived and you thrived in that situation and you knew better, like you at any turn could have been like, it's just easier if I do this. I get money if I do this. I give love and attention if I do this. And that you knew innately, spiritually, whatever it was, that I can't go down this way because this is going to be my path. Like, God bless, because you were not, it's easy for us to look at this as an adult and be like, oh yeah, I was just in this situation. No, you were a baby. Like you were little, and that is amazing. So I commend you for that.
Thank you. And I do believe that God has had his hand on me. Just before I became homeless, like I said, I had started going to church, I would say around 12 or 13 years old. And I was very heavy in my faith. And so I remember like one of the times when she asked me to go strip, I was like, oh, God is watching. I am not, you know, you could try to convince me, but I know that God's watching me. And so that did lend to some of the decision making that I had as well.
And Janae, what was your defining moment of when, I don't want to say homelessness just solves itself in one day, but what was your defining moment where you were like, enough is enough, something needs to change? And what was kind of that process that you took to transition into the next phase of your life?
So every day I knew that that wasn't the place for me. I knew immediately this is not where I'm going to end up. And I believed that. And I think that's what's important is really believing in yourself and your ability to pull yourself out of the situation. And somehow I really did believe in myself. And I had strong faith that this was not the end state for me. And I was fighting every day, trying to find a way out. I was working, I was going to school. I was applying for jobs that I hoped would make enough. Now, Hollywood is a hard place to pull yourself out of poverty in. You know, a lot of people move there with the intent of becoming actors and actresses, and they end up working in restaurants and they fall into the sex work or the drug industry because they can't survive on restaurant salary and they're not getting enough money in some of those acting jobs because typically they're getting like just extra roles and stuff. So I was just imagine even worse for me because I was homeless. I was, you know, still trying to overcome some of the abandonment issues that I had and the self-esteem issues that I had. I didn't have the upbringing that some of these people had. But it was when, you know, I ended up aging out of the system and I had to move to an adult shelter. And that adult shelter had a program that was supposed to help me to change my story. And so I would give them a portion of my savings and eventually I would be able to get an apartment. So they had a program that was going to help me. But my friend joined the Navy and she invited me to have lunch with the recruiter. And I honestly had like burgundy hair, long nails, like there was no military in me at all. But she took me to the lunch. Of course, free lunch was in me. So I was excited for that. So I was eating ketchup packets in some cases. And so, yeah, like to survive. And so for me, like a free cheeseburger, I mean, like it was a really good, big, juicy cheeseburger. So that was a lot for me at the time. I went for the lunch and I listened to the recruiter and he was giving me something that I hadn't had, I think ever. And that was a vision beyond the next day. I was living in survival mode. I was just trying to survive day to day. And what he gave me was something that was like 3 to 5 years out. And I didn't even know that was something that was possible. I had nothing to lose and I had no one to leave behind. And so I was just like, yeah, let's do this. Let's see what happens. It was peacetime, of course. So I didn't have anything to worry about with that at the time. And so I just went ahead and took the risk and enlisted in the Navy. And that's what changed my story.
And for those listening who are listening, like, wait, a cheeseburger or the free food? Can we talk about the $6 cheeseburger as you reference in your book? And you say I love how you shared this part because you talking and sharing your journey when entering the military. And again, you're still in survival mode. You're looking for change, you're looking to thrive, and you're looking to flip your life around. And so the military offered structure, but with this section of your journey is, I love it and how you share it, because in your book, as you state, that $6 cheeseburger was not free, and it came with the hefty price of 4 years of your life. Can you share what you mean by that? Because so many people are looking at your journey, even up to this point, like how you overcame the homelessness and your mom abandoning you, and that whole journey alone, you were a child. Like the trauma, the abandonment, everything that comes with that is a lot. And you overcame that aspect of your life, and you aren't equipped with all of this of what to do and what's next. So there's so much fear in all of that. So I want to highlight that for everyone listening. Like, she was a child, and then as she's explaining her journey, it's important to like pause, because I know for you, like, you've had so much success along the way. And so even sharing that aspect of your book is empowering alone.
Yeah. I, when I talk about joining the military, I talk about all of the change, the positive change that it had for my life. But I also endured trauma in the military. And it definitely wasn't a free cheeseburger, because I, ended up enlisting for 4 years, and I served a total of 8. When I joined the military, I thought, okay, this is it. I've got a family. I've got all these people I can trust. And I was very naive in thinking that I finally had the safety that I hadn't had for so many years, not realizing that the military is not necessarily a safe place for women either. And so I ended up actually, I think within the first year of, it was less than that. It was actually within my first 6 months experiencing sexual assault. I let my guard down. I had spent 2.5 years on the street with my guard up. At 16 years old, my guard had already been up, and I was protecting myself every day. And when I got in the military, I was like, okay, I can finally let it down. I've got all these brothers and sisters that have my back. And I got invited onto a trip, and I ended up actually experiencing sexual assault in the military. Like I said, I went to war. So it wasn't free. And it did come with a sacrifice as well.
Absolutely. And I don't want to give away too much of your book, because it's definitely something that we want everyone to read, because Janae has overcome so much, and she continues to talk about how she had to be her own hero. No one's going to come and save you, and what that truly means. And she embodies that every day. And people often look at survivors and they're like, oh, well, you just need to get over it. You need to move forward. And there's so much discredit and so much attacks and trolling constantly at survivors. And it's just like, as a society, if we stop and take a step back and truly listen to what they're saying, everyone is going through something, and we all have a story. So if we were to stop and pause for a moment, all of us have experienced some sort of trauma. And looking at Janae's story from childhood till now, there's so many things where everyone can relate, because it's happening in plain sight. And so many people want to turn a blind eye to it and not stand up for it, or even stand by and support survivors. So thank you for the authenticity in your book, and you really breaking that down, because there's so many stigmas around it and so much discredit to the survivors. And I just love how you put it in perspective of an everyday view. And it's like, that is your life. It's not a trend. It's not a hashtag. And then people see who you are now and see you as an influencer. and see your following. And it's like, you don't know me. You don't know the trauma and what the trials, tribulations, everything I had to overcome. And you did it by yourself because you believed in yourself. So thank you for that. And then transitioning into even in the military is in less than 6 months, you went from meeting actors who played sellers into you were on the screen in Disney's Pearl Harbor movie to now you're a sailor being kicked off for war in real life and for not after 9/11. Can you even just explain that aspect and those emotions? Because again, like, it's sometimes with the recruiting, it's not, they don't give you all the details, and it's not all glitz and glam, and there's war, but it's sold in a different package. And don't get me wrong, no, I like the military, yes, there's heroes, all of that, but just like every aspect of our lives. No, even like looking at, as we just did a podcast with TikTok moderator, when she was given that job, they just told her, will you be able to take in this kind of content? And she didn't know she was going to be desensitized to looking at the exploitation of children, and didn't realize the trauma and how it affected her later on in her life and her journey. So can we even just share like that aspect and those emotions? Because most people will say, well, did you even know what you were signed up for? Like, you being so young, and like I would say the awareness and the education around that of what that looks like, because so many people are recruited at such a young age.
And I think to add to it, when I was recruited, we had been at peacetime for so long that I don't even think the recruiter could have foreseen what was about to happen. And so when he recruited me, it was like, you know, the Navy, you're going to be on a ship, you'll travel the world. And he did embellish a bit. You know, he said there was going to be a bowling alley on the ship, which there wasn't. I would always be next to the ocean, which the Navy does have inland bases, and I ended up at one for 4 years. So I had no expectation that I was going to go to war. And he even said that. He was like, it's peacetime, you don't have anything to worry about. So for the first year, like you said, we were kind of like a floating Hollywood, our ship, because we were in San Diego. So the celebrities like to come down to visit. That was their community service type stuff that they would do, you know, come see us. And they actually had the Pearl Harbor movie premiere on the ship. So we got 2 weeks in Hawaii with all these celebrities on board, you know, meeting Kate Beckinsale and Ben Affleck. And
that just ages you. You and I were like the same age. That just ages you that you were there.
It does. It does. Even the fact that I was one of the first people to go after 9/11. And, you know, it's interesting because like Bridget was saying on social media, how people see me and they have this expectation. I remember I did a podcast once and they were like, oh, she just joined the military so that she could get internet clout. And I was like, there was no internet. There were no video, photos,
yeah,
cell
that
phones.
didn't exist back in that day.
I was like, I think maybe we had flip phones, but I don't even think we had those when I joined.
No, because I think I got a credit card. I got a credit card just to get a credit so I could get a phone when I was like that age. So that's where we're at here.
Yes, I remember it was like pagers and like the pay per minute or whatever. So I had no idea what I was getting myself into. And after the Pearl Harbor premiere, I was like, if this is what my life is going to be like, I could do this forever, because it was fun. Like, we were really having a good time. And that was in July. And then 9/11 happened right after. And so now we're going from, I just watched the Pearl Harbor movie where, you know, it's battleships, you know, getting attacked, to now after 9/11, we're one of the first group that's being sent off to Operation Enduring Freedom. None of us had any idea about what war would look like, especially from an aircraft carrier. And so we get to the Arabian Sea, we meet a couple other aircraft carriers out there, and we ended up just spending night ops for 112 days straight, launching combat air operations over Afghanistan. Now, combat from a ship is very different from combat on land, and we don't actually see it, but we know that we're participating in it, which is very eerie. It doesn't feel good to know that you're participating in that type of operation. But after 9/11, I think everybody felt a great sense of pride for country, and I was one of them as well. And I felt like I was doing something good for my country. So going to war, just leaving and knowing that's what I was going to was scary. I feel like for me, though, it was a little bit less scary than maybe for people who hadn't already endured so much hardship in their life. So I think I was a little bit more, I would say I kind of numb myself when I'm in a situation like that to feelings. And so I was able to kind of numb myself in a different way than the other people were.
And what would you say, Janae, after being in the military, what were the ways that you can look back now and see that changed you in a positive way versus where you were before you went in?
There's a couple things. So the first is, I already kind of had, I wouldn't say I had structure, but I did have like a strict regime that I had to stick by in order to be able to live in some of the shelters. But the military gave me a family. It did give me community. There's people that I met, right when I first entered that I'm still close with today. And some of them I consider true family. So it did give me that. I got mentorship and guidance that I probably wouldn't have gotten otherwise. I did get the opportunity to go to college. So I got my degree after I got out of the Navy. And then it just gave me a head start or like that I wouldn't have had otherwise. And so I was able to transition out of the military into a very successful career. I would not have been able to do that in the stage that I was in. Because I was living in survival mode in Hollywood, I was working under the table because nobody could afford to pay me minimum wage. So I was working and I didn't have a high school diploma. So I was working under the table for less than minimum wage. And I was missing school to go to work. And so I couldn't get my diploma. And so I was stuck in a little bit of a cycle. And I think the system does keep people down in Los Angeles. And I was one of those people that was being kept down. The only option that I really had was to join the military. I would like to see change in that way where, I'd say the military did change my life, but I don't think that it should have to be the way people have to go to get out of poverty or to get out of homelessness.
Right. And on the contrary, what would you like people to know about the military that maybe they don't see? You experienced abuse while you were there, and you're not the only one. There's been a lot of, especially lately, people coming forth. What are some things that you feel the public needs to be more educated on from a woman's perspective or just overall that we're missing as a society, how we view the military?
The epidemic of sexual assault in the military is a huge issue, and it's something that I have been speaking out against. It's not just sexual abuse, it's also just violence towards women in the military, mistreatment towards women in the military. And I'll expand that to also the LGBTQ community experiences it as well. And possibly, even worse in some cases. It's a huge problem, and it's the issue really that is when it comes to DUIs or when it comes to drug use, there's kind of a no tolerance policy. But when it comes to sexual assault or violence against women in the military, it almost seems like the investigations, in my experience, are drawn out. And they're drawn out. So the first thing that happens when you report it is, everybody's like, okay, hush, hush, don't say anything. Let's wait until all the facts come out. Wait until all the facts come out. So the victim is kind of silenced until the facts come out. But in the meantime, while they're waiting on all the facts to come out, these investigations are long drawn out. Long. In my case, it was like about over a year that the investigation went on. And so during that time, the victim ends up, being gaslit, being retaliated against, and being essentially driven crazy, and then pushed out for their mental health issues. So it's just a compounding issue for the person who experienced it. Meanwhile, the predators are able to stay in, maintain their benefits, rebound, and then essentially grow in their career into really high level positions where then they can protect predators. And so I just feel like this system is supposed to be getting better. I don't know if I'm seeing that from as a civilian. But it just seems like the system works against women in the military and victims. And what I think needs to happen is quick, harsh punishment. You know, if somebody is a predator and they're assaulting, it needs to be dealt with quickly, and it needs to be the harshest punishment, harsher than drug use, harsher than a DUI. These people should not be kept in. And one of the other things I see a lot of is their accolades being put up front. You know, oh, well, yeah, but he's got 20 years and he has this many awards. And it's like, so what? You know, so what? He just took somebody's innocence away, or he just,
Also
you know,
agreed.
yeah. So all of that goes away, and it shouldn't matter anymore.
And I love how you highlight that. And honestly, I'm blessed to have been connected to you from TMR. And I know recently, talking about accolades and mental health and 22 a day and the story that I was able to connect with you on and how it really hit home. Can we talk about even the mental health aspect and how the 22 a day sometimes in those stories, like for example, Madeline Torres' story, and how that was a murder suicide, but then the vet community, they stayed silent and they didn't share or shine light on her being a hero and the truth of it. They waited for about, if I'm not mistaken, a week to then finally her name came out. And if you didn't advocate and give that story a voice, I wouldn't have seen it. Half of social media wouldn't have seen it. And it's like, look at the perspective of her family. She deserved better. And so if we can even talk about that aspect, because he murdered an innocent soul, and his accolades were immediately thrown all over the mainstream media. They were all pushed out there, but then no one would say her name.
And he was elevated in the veteran community for his like grunty type of persona. So he had kind of like, if you look at some of the videos on the brand that he was representing, the videos were him being violent and him showing actually the exact behaviors that were real for him. So it was supposedly like a facade, but in reality, that's how he was actually treating people in real life. So this was being elevated. So this man became an influencer in the veteran community, and he was elevated in the veteran community. When this happened, within hours, the people close to them and a huge community, I would say a good 100 people, knew that he had murdered Madeline. And it was like some people snuck by taking off their post about him and didn't say anything about Madeline. And others even left their post up about him, giving him praise for 22 a day, talking about, you know, his mental health issues and kind of highlighting those. But it was almost like they just wanted her name to kind of not ever be told. And so then it didn't bring light to what really happened. And I happened to come across a post on Facebook that said, you know, something along the lines of like, our hearts go out to the 9/9 family. And I was like, what is that about? And I saw in the comments something like, we don't want to spread rumors. This is where I talk about where it's like, let's all wait for the facts. So we didn't wait for the facts to praise Zach. We didn't wait for the facts to call him 22 a day and to highlight, you know, the fact that he had run for presidency and the fact that he was, you know, in a senior position and all his military background. Nobody waited for the facts to talk about that. But as soon as the name of the female that he murdered came up, it was like, well, let's all slow down now. Let's not ruin his reputation. And, you know, let's have respect for his family. Well, what about her family that's sitting around watching you guys praise this person, you know? And so I got curious and I went and I looked it up and I found one article that kind of told the story. But that article again says 9-line employee, presidential candidate, blah, blah, blah. And then it refers to her as a girl. Doesn't even talk about her military service. And I was like, okay, this is not adding up. So I was able to just kind of start sharing it. And as I'm sharing it, her family's contacting me saying, thank you. We have been trying so hard to get her name out there and nobody would listen to us. And these are employees of the company that know what happened, but nobody's just, all I'm saying is post a picture of her, right? But nobody wanted to because they didn't want to spread rumors, which is just what we deal with also in the military when we have situations like this. Nobody wants to talk to it. The victim gets isolated. The victim gets pushed down, pushed out. So it's almost like it played out in the veteran community just as it would as if we were still in the military. And I went to the post on his page. So he posted a video after he killed her and he said, you know, I have demons. And he said something like, it sucks. Like it was just like an accident. And people are commenting, understandably saying, you know, rest in peace, 22 a day. And her family, the people who actually found her, are commenting saying, no, you guys don't understand. There's more to this story. He's not a hero. He's not a good person. And those people were getting attacked by his followers. They were being told, have some respect for him. And it's like, what? Have respect? Like he just killed a woman and nobody wants to talk about it. So it's just, it seems like it's still playing out. Now, I feel like there's talk that, you know, for him, like it was PTSD and this and that. My opinion is no, he was not a good person. There's a lot of people who are dealing with mental health issues from the military, but they're not going out and killing other people. So I don't think that when it comes to what he did, I don't believe it falls into the 22 a day at all. And I don't believe that he should be praised as some sort of hero. I think all of that goes away because he took a life. And not only did he ruin her family, he ruined his family. Now his children also have to live with this, you know, and their children are going to suffer as a result because they're going to pass possibly their trauma on and it's going to carry on for generations.
And she was pregnant.
She was pregnant. She was, I believe, 9 weeks pregnant, and she left behind a son as well.
And that's so true what you said, Janae, just about, you know, praising people because of different titles that they have. We're trained to do that in every industry. You know, there's people that idolize extreme sinners and people who are not people worth idolizing, right? Not that idolatry is a good thing to do with anybody, but there seems to be that trend where that is what's thrown out. You know what I mean? And it's unbelievable for people to see a headline like that and to think, gosh, somebody with a resume like that could really do something. A military, you know, whatever his position was, somebody in the military could have done that. You know, it's hard for society to wrap their minds around somebody that is high performing could also be a psychopath, right? But I want to remind people, Jeffrey Dahmer was in the military, you know, like you can have physical fitness skills and you can be good at things and you can even be a charming, nice person at times. It doesn't make you a great person in every aspect of your life, you know, and just like how we are saying, you know, giving survivors a voice. When is that going to be a part of the conversation too, that we're okay even just talking about that person? It's really sad that just because somebody has a resume that looks impressive, that somebody else just gets swept under the rug, like their life doesn't matter. You know, if we're going to give attention to one person, we should be, as a society, being curious and wanting to get curious and understand the other side of the story.
Mm-hmm. And I remember when I first started sharing it, people were like, well, you know, it's very courageous of you. And I'm like, why would it be courageous of me? I don't understand what's courageous about sharing the fact that this woman was part of the equation. And I quickly learned that it really had to be courageous because I ended up getting smeared as well by one of his friends. And this person went on a whole smear campaign. I won't give that person any light. But I will say that exactly what people said could play out, did play out. And it was really just a matter of raising awareness. People, once there are a lot of bad people in this world. And once they catch on that you're raising awareness against what they do, they find a way to discredit you. So my opinion is that they were waiting until they could find something on her. Certain people were waiting until they could find something on her so that they could somehow smear it or somehow turn it into her fault that she was murdered. And I saw a lot of the comments were like, well, what was she doing there? They were trying to find a way to pin this on her as a victim. They could. So I called that out in the beginning. I was like, this is what's going on. So rather than smear her, they came to smear me, the messenger, right? And it's the same thing with human trafficking, sex trafficking. The people who are trying to raise awareness are the ones who get silenced. We're the ones who get smeared, right? They want to discredit us so that it discredits our message. It's not us they're trying to discredit. It's the message that they're trying to eliminate and they're trying to get rid of so they can continue to do these bad things.
Yeah, we have to, as a society, be really aware. Like, you could know someone in a very good capacity. You could be friends with that person. They could go to church with you. You could know their family. They could do all the right things. You don't know them in a different light. Like, a lot of times abused women will say, well, my husband, well, I know him and he would never do that. Do you see the black eye? Like, yeah, you know he wouldn't do that, but I know a different story. So again, just because you don't know somebody in that light, don't discredit somebody else from saying something. Just be open to listening to what the possibility that, wow, I didn't know that side of that person. I didn't know that that person who comes to work every day is a raging alcoholic at night.
Right.
We don't know everything.
And that you can be psycho and, you know, high functioning at the same time. A lot of the survivors that we have on, they were horrifically abused by the same parent that was a pastor in church or a police officer or the sheriff or head of the police department or a doctor. You know, there's so many different ways that abusers hide, you know, and unfortunately, because of their accolades and where they are in society, they're also very highly protected, which is really sad, especially by the media. You know, these organizations, the military, they don't want to grow somebody in a company, in an organization, in the military, only to have news come out that their decision resulted in somebody murdering somebody, you know? So there's a lot of cover-ups because it something like that, it snowballs, you know. It's just like being a kid and you get in trouble and your parents now have to deal with people asking, well, I heard what happened to your kid. You know, it's the same whenever you're at a company. If somebody does something and it affects the entire operation behind it and makes people ask questions, and you know, they don't want people asking questions.
Yeah. And when you talk about like respecting people, so there's a story, I don't know that I go into this story in my book, but there's a story that I tell about a chief that I worked for when I was on the ship. And it was interesting because when I first started working for him, I worked very closely with him, and that's a senior enlisted person. And in the military, as a woman, you kind of put your guard up after a while because you almost get hit on a lot. A lot of people eventually, like they're mentoring you, and somehow it'll lead into them trying to make a move on you, and it's really frustrating. It's irritating. So when you encounter people who don't, you really develop a higher level of respect for them because it's like, oh, finally somebody that is truly mentoring me, and I don't have to worry about him having ulterior motives. And so I had a chief like that on my deployment, my last deployment, and I really respected him. He was a very quiet guy, super nice guy, and I had to, you know, work with him every day. One day we were in a meeting and we were waiting for this chief to show up to the meeting, and he didn't show up. And so I called over to the berthing where he was sleeping, and I got a hold of somebody, and I was like, hey, chief isn't in our meeting. He's supposed to be here. Can you guys check on him to make sure he's okay? So it was dark in the berthing. So they go and they check on him, and they're like, he's in his rack. And they're like, he's sweating really bad. And we're like, okay, so we're going to call away a medical emergency. Can you turn the lights on so that when they get up there, they can get him out of his rack and take him down to medical? So they turn the lights on, and one of the chiefs almost passes out. He had slit his arteries, and it wasn't sweat that they felt, it was blood. He was covered in blood, and he was basically laying there dying in his rack. So they call away the medical emergency. Everybody's rushing to give blood for this chief, including myself. Now I consider him a close friend. So I'm like freaking out. I'm like running to give blood for him. And he ends up getting saved, and they put him in like a room, in a holding room. And I'm thinking that they're putting him in there because he's suicidal. So I go down there. I start going down kind of regularly to check on him, to sit with him, to make sure he's okay, because I really respected him and I cared about him. And I wanted him to not try to kill himself again. My master chief says, SK2, I'm going to tell you something right now. I know you very well. Don't go down there anymore. And I was like, what is wrong with you? He needs help. He needs someone to be there for him. And I was really upset that he said that. I was like, why would you say that? And he's like, just trust me. Trust me. I'll explain it to you when we get home. So I respected him. I did what he said. I didn't go back down there and talk to the chief anymore. We get home. We all get off the ship. We go say hello to our families and everything like that from deployment. We get back and he's like, okay, now that we're back, I want you to do me a favor. Google the chief's name. I Googled the chief's name, and come to find out the reason that he tried to kill himself was because he had been molesting his 2 children. And they had told, I feel so betrayed when I tell the story. They had told their teacher, we're afraid because daddy's going to come home and this is what he does to us. So his wife called and gave him a heads up that the police were going to be on the pier waiting for him when he got back because his children had told what he was doing. So his wife knew. And he was arrested immediately. He pleaded guilty. He served his time, and he's now back out on the streets. I felt so betrayed. I struggled with that because I was like, this is somebody he would never, it's like I had that initial thought, like, no way, he could never. But as a survivor myself, I knew that they weren't lying. Those kids weren't lying. And for him to plead guilty, they definitely weren't. So I guess I had an opportunity where I could have been like, oh, but he has, 20 plus years in the military. He's an accomplished chief. He's a nice guy. He was mentoring me. I could have gone over all his accolades. But the only thing I thought about were those 2 children and the terror that they lived in and the relief that they must have felt while their dad was deployed. And so here he is, he's deployed. He's not making moves on women. He's not trying to assault women because he's waiting until he gets home to do it to his own children, So yeah, when I hear these stories, I'm not like, oh, this person's an amazing guy. I'm like, I believe the person that said this happened to them. And in most cases, they're telling the truth.
Wow. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Especially because even for survivors, we often see so much attack and the discredit, and it's just truly heartbreaking as well from that aspect of what it's like for us, even sharing all the stories coming out today. It's like, why is it so hard for people to just listen and understand? It's like, what do you need? Like a rape video or a video like that for somebody to stop and listen and be like, wow, because there's signs, there's red flags there. And it's like, it's sad that it takes tragedy and innocent souls being hurt to put spotlight on it. And half the time there's not spotlight on it. And it takes people like us to put a spotlight on it to say, what is going on? What is the truth? So, wow.
And it's like we could scream as loud as we want. And sometimes it just feels like, I think there is awareness being made. I think that us being able to have this conversation publicly is a big step already. But yeah, I don't understand what it is that is making people not want to step up and really step in, because that's what they need to do, is just step in and help.
Yeah. And it was like Bridget was saying, like, how can you see something like that and like, or hear something and not be compassionate about the other side of the story that's being covered up, the victims? We're taught so much to focus on the perpetrators. One of the guys that I interviewed, John Wedger, he said in a, dismal way, like, I wish he was an ex-police officer who worked on child abuse cases and had to see a lot of, inappropriate images from arrests and, getting on people, having to hack computers and this and that. And he's like, I know that people aren't supposed to look at this material, and I don't think they should because it's so horrific. But part of me wishes that people could see what I've seen, because you don't understand how bad it is until you're faced with it. And he goes, I feel like if everybody saw an image like what I've seen, there would be a revolution, like nobody would be able to sleep after seeing stuff like that. And it's like, you know, why does somebody have to see something so horrible to pay attention, but they'll pay attention to what the perpetrator does or says, or what people do to discredit survivors, or they'll look for any way possible that they themselves can discredit survivors, instead of just saying, what if this is true? What if even 5% of what this survivor is saying is true? If even 5% is true, I should be horrified that that is even happening at that percentage, you know, and I hate to say it, but it's way closer to 100%, you know, than 5%, right? But
Yeah.
it is really disturbing how little people look at this. And I bet for you, having spoken, trying to speak out about this for so long, and even before, whenever you were younger, you know, understanding something inherent within yourself that's saying all the stuff I'm seeing is wrong without being taught that. What would you say for you? What made you want to go public with speaking out? Was it just that you had tried so many times and felt stifled? Or was there a moment where you're like, all right, I need to write a book about this. I need to come out and tell the whole world about this?
I had gone most of my life, not like, I would share my stories with people close to me, but I didn't really do anything publicly. And for me, the reason was, and so this is why a lot of people don't get involved in some situations too, though, is I was still trying to have a relationship with my mom. And so my family would tell me, stop talking about it, get over it, move on. And they would even gaslight me and make fun of me. And it's like, so my mom, she dropped me off, but my sisters were not dropped off. And so they were still, one was still living at home and the other one had already moved out. Neither of them experienced homelessness. And so they would make fun of me, and they would, like, you know, kind of joking about how I lead with that conversation. And but then they would also get kind of mad at me and say, stop talking about it, because I think they carried guilt of their own. So it wasn't until about 4 or 5 years ago when I started, it was a little bit of both. Like, I started talking about it on social media because I finally had this platform, and I was like, I don't want to waste an opportunity like this. I don't want to use a platform for myself. This is not my platform. It's the people who follow me's platform. And so I want to be a voice to those people, or for those people. And so I started kind of slowly piecemeal telling some of my story. And it started to create a greater divide between me, my mom, and my sisters, because they were kind of getting mad at me. Like, you're embarrassing us. You're making people ask questions. And so a couple of years ago, I finally was like, okay, I'm done. I'm done trying to keep this relationship going, because I am in a situation where I'm having to choose between trying to earn love from people who never truly loved me in the first place, and having a purpose and using my story, not just to heal by helping others, but also to really raise awareness and hopefully save lives. And so I had to finally just kind of cut ties with them completely. And once I did, I was like, okay, now I finally feel free. I feel like I can say what I need to say and tell the story. And that's what I've done. It's challenging, but there's I think about, and I'll, like, you know, when you look at my book, I kept this picture of my younger self next to me the entire time. And as I was writing the book, and every night I would look at that picture and I would cry and I would say, this is for you, because nobody did it for her. Nobody stepped in for her. Nobody stepped up for her. And so I'm stepping up for her all over the world, whether it's my daughters, whether it's somebody else's daughter, whether it's Madeline Coulter, you know, whoever it is, I'm here to be their voice, because somehow God continued to allow me to live. He pulled me through everything, and he gave me a voice and a platform that I don't know. This has to be the reason. And so I feel devoted to that, and just really sharing that story and being that voice that I never had. Sorry, we're all gonna cry together tonight.
No,
I know. I need a tissue. Beautiful.
It's so real, and it's real and raw. And I love how there's a misperception. And what drives me nuts is people will see your influencer label, and then you still, even speaking out on these stories, and as much as you overcome being a survivor and being a veteran, you're still attacked even within those communities. Yes, there's love and support, but at the same time, there's also that label of influencer. And so people try to discredit you even with that. And it's what I love about you and your story and you as your platform is your platform really is for everybody. And you don't get that from many people, and you keep it real and authentic. And so people see you and they're like, oh, she's gorgeous. And they just see the image, but it's like they don't take the time to know you as a person. And now you're a mom, and now like what that life looks like even for your daughters, because even as they grow up and you had your own struggles in that, and even with pregnancy and all of that, and it's like, we just stop, because you're attacking the wrong person. Go attack the pedophiles, go attack the abusers, don't attack me. I'm just trying to help. I could save somebody else's life. So everyone listening, what we strongly always push is take a step back and stop and put yourself in a survivor's shoes. Really listen to their stories. And if you can't support with buying merch or buying a book or monetarily, it does nothing and costs nothing to like, share, comment, save, even reach out to them and say, thank you. You are courageous. I'm saying a prayer for you. Because those little things mean the world to survivors. They don't care about the money. They're not doing it for the money. And they're using their platform so they know other survivors are not, that you're not alone in this. And we do believe you and see you and hear you, because this happens every single day. So I love that you've used your platform. And as we were talking offline, as you spoke at a big event this past weekend, is you even standing up there and sharing your story. People don't see when you reshare your story and you stand up there, they don't see what it takes to prepare yourself for that. And you're standing in front of strangers and sharing the darkest moments of your life. And you're judged or met with adversity. And even you personally have fought through mainstream media. You've fought through every part and every aspect to get your story heard. It's not like people were running to you saying, hey, can I share your story? You are courageous. You are a hero. It took you literally fighting for yourself and being your own hero. So I forever am inspired by you and honor you for that. And thank you for your service and everything that you do, because it does take a lot of courage, especially in this day and age and censorship and social media. So everyone listening, like, if we could encourage you to do one thing, it would be to be empathetic, show compassion, like, share, comment these stories, and help elevate these stories, because they really are the heroes. And people idolize these different influencers or celebrities, and we're elevating the wrong stories and normalizing and desensitizing literally all the wrong abuse and trauma. Trying to stop what we're trying to stop, that's getting elevated. So
I agree. It feels like those are the voices that get elevated and ours are getting suppressed. I get shadow banned all the time. Anytime I mention anything about trafficking, anytime I mention anything about sexual assault, I definitely get shut down or shadow banned. I think I've gone long periods of time where my stuff doesn't get any visibility, and people be like, oh my gosh, I didn't even realize you were still on social media. And I'm like, this is crazy. It's weird because there was in the beginning when I first started kind of growing on social media, I was a little nervous about sharing my story. And so I just mostly shared pictures of myself, and I shared my love for fashion, and I tried to be motivational to people, and I tried to share like bits and pieces, but I almost feel like I was attacked by people because I didn't have credibility. And I just felt like I wasn't sharing enough of my story. I felt like I wasn't truly living to my purpose, living up to my purpose. And it wasn't until I went to the Drew Barrymore show, and I'm appreciative of the opportunity. It was a great experience. But one of the things that I felt a little bit deflated about after I left, and I take full accountability for this, is that when we went to the show, there was 4 women there, and then there was a gentleman there, and it was for a Veterans Day highlight. And I appreciate that she did this. I'm not bashing Drew or her production at all. The gentleman, he was well deserving. He sat on the couch and he was able to tell his story. He got an entire portion of the show to tell his story about his experience in war. The 4 women that were brought there, we were given makeovers, and they did a little like reel of our story, but for the most part, it was about a makeover for us, our looks. And I appreciated it. It was a great experience, but I left feeling like, man, I really had an opportunity to share my story with such a broad audience, and I never really got to do that. And I felt a little deflated about that, but then I took some personal accountability in that, well, how would they know to ask you to share your story if you're not already sharing it? You know, I wasn't fully sharing it. I was sharing bits and pieces, but for the most part, I was just sharing my love for fashion and just being a little silly online. So people didn't understand all of the substance that I had, except for those long time followers who had seen bits and pieces of my story. And so that's when I was like, you know what? I'm not living up to my purpose, and I don't feel fully satisfied. I need to get my story out there. I need to live up to my purpose, which is to speak up on behalf of those who are suffering, and most importantly, to share the message that you can be your own hero. So many people today, actually, the statistic is 1/3 of Americans are dissatisfied with their lives. 100 million people are dissatisfied with their lives. And so many people are getting stuck in the victim mindset that I was like, I have to share with the world that you can be your own hero. And if you get stuck in that victim mindset, you're just setting yourself up to stay in that cycle. And so that's where I shared it. I was so scared to put my full story out there. You read it, Bridget. I went into some details that I was scared. I'm still scared, you know, knowing that everybody has that at their fingertips. I can't even read my own book because it just gives me anxiety knowing what people know now about me. Those are my deepest, darkest traumas. And if you want to hurt somebody, that's the stuff that you get to pull up and hurt them with. And so I have to be prepared for that. And so that was really hard for me to share this, but those messages, like you said, Bridget, those, you know, the tweets, I get those a lot. And when I get them, that's what pushes me further. And it just reminds me that this was all for at least one person to be saved. And I believe more than one has already been saved just by my story in my book.
You know what I think is amazing, though? At the same time, whenever you say, hey, those are my biggest vulnerabilities, I also think, and I'm not endorsing Eminem because I think he's trash, but that movie 8 Mile that he was in, that last rap battle, right? He knew that he had all this stuff that people could come after him for. And so what did he do? He said it all himself. All right, you can do what you want with it, but I already know everything I've been through and I'm going to put it out there. And that's, you take your power back by doing that in a way, you know, by just exposing it and saying, hey, guess what? I already know, like, you can't tell me anything about myself that I don't know. And you can't tell anybody else something about me that I didn't say first. And I think it's so badass that you did that. I think it's amazing because I can't imagine, it's hard enough to write like a fiction story and want to put that out, something that's not even real. You know, Becky just made a book and I know it was tough, you know, there's a lot of steps that go into that. And it's a beautiful release to create something and to birth it into real life. But, you know, you didn't make some nonfiction happy. I mean, it has a happy ending, but a lot of what you talked about is what got you to that happy ending, which was a lot of really, you know, horrific and traumatizing things. So I just want to say, like, you're badass. And I think that in a way, it also protects you because now there isn't anything that somebody can say about you that's not in that book, you know?
It's a good point.
And you never know who you're going to reach. Bridget always says power of one, and your story, somebody can read it and they may not reach out right away. It may be they have to read the book again. And you know what? I'm finally brave enough to DM you and just tell you, you know what? I have a similar story. And I know that for the three of us, we have not been through the same trauma, but putting ourselves out there. I don't know how many people on a regular basis, I'll talk about what we do and they'll say, yeah, I was abused as a child.
Mhm.
And it's commonplace where it's like, because we're vulnerable enough to say, hey, this is what we do, this is who we support, this is what we believe, they're like, I can sense you're a safe space. And so know that that's exactly what you're giving to other people is, she's a safe space, she gets me, she gets it. Or even if it's not the same, she gets some of it. And so, yeah, the shitty people are the shitty people, and there always will be shitty people. But no, you're probably making a much larger impact even than what you know, because people just don't want it. They're not ready to say. But unfortunately, you can, for every 100 good things that people say, that one person really just gets you. And it's like,
And like what Bridget was saying, like somebody couldn't, there's no way that somebody could look at a photo of you today and think, wow, that's what she went through. She was a victim of all these horrific things. You know, I think that gives so many people hope to see what's on the other side of making these decisions of, I'm going to believe in myself, you know, unrelentlessly. I'm going to just always believe in myself no matter what. And I'm going to believe that I'm better than the bad situations that I'm in. And I'm always going to have this unrelenting belief that I'm going to get out of it. I think that gives so many people hope, because that's a struggle. You know, you dealt with self-esteem issues and somehow we're able to navigate all of that. And it's not something a lot of people, you know, a lot of people don't end up having those lessons right away. They earn them later on after, you know, doing a lot of things that they either shouldn't or that they're lured into, right? But I think it gives people hope too, to see, gosh, look what she went through and look where she's at. Look how beautiful she is. She's smiling. She has a family. She's a mother. She has a thriving career. She wrote a book, something that most people never do. And she went through all these things and has created all these really beautiful things. So I think there's also that element where you're going to give hope to a lot of people who think, I can never heal. I can never have a family. I can never have a steady job or get out of this. You know, yes, you can. And here's the perfect walking miracle to prove that to you.
Thank you. And knowing that that is a possibility, and that's why I shared my book, is it's just, I believe that we heal through helping others. And like, that's what you ladies are doing. You've essentially dedicated your lives to helping people. And I know that it gets deep for you sometimes. And I know that you probably have very difficult nights after hearing some of these stories, and even probably just reading my story. But hearing these stories and just feeling almost like, we're trying so hard to get this message out, but why isn't anything changing? Why isn't anything happening? And so there's sometimes, like, even for me, like when I, you know, my sexual assault in the military was 20 years ago and it's still happening. Right. And it's like, so I know that for you guys, this gets heavy, and I appreciate, and I watch your podcast and I think, man, these are some strong women. I can't say the plural word, very strong women, to be able to sit and do this day in and day out. And I can just imagine the stories that are coming to you and how heavy that can be on you ladies. And so, you know, I can completely empathize with you, and I think you're amazing as well.
Thank you. And your story, like literally when reading this book, it had me like crying. Like I was on an emotional roller coaster with you, and how you say you write it for that one person and one day at a time. And that's constantly something I say in the power of one. And the necklace I actually have on says one day at a time. And so then even looking through and reading your book, and like even going through my own adversity and everything that I've overcome, I think even as women, we don't stop and even celebrate where we are. So
Yes.
I appreciated your book because I could relate, coming from working in the entertainment industry and even graduating from the University of Phoenix as well. And even when I had my daughter and you're talking about your age and being in school and going back and what that all looked like in motherhood, and even sharing the aspect of motherhood and what we put on ourselves, and even the pressure and the unknown, especially when it came to motherhood. And so me having my daughter at such a young age and knowing that I had her at home alone in the bathroom, and I was like, oh my gosh, like I could have made a traumatic life decision based on just, oh my gosh, society labels, and I have school, how am I going to provide for her? And just going off of not from a healed space and just going off of emotion, I could have taken down a path of, I did look at the options of adoption and receiving homes and what that looked like. So that part of your book, like even as you talk about the Hollywood and me being in that like environment and the luring and all that, and I'm like, it made me even play back like memories that I lived through, and I was like, oh my gosh, like you don't stop and really process all of that and those emotions. So I love how transparent you were, because even just reading your book, you really see how it could happen to anyone. And so when people say, well, what gives you the passion, or why do you speak out so much? And it's like, that could be me, or that could be my daughter or my niece, my nephew. And so it's like, for me, it's like, well, maybe, sadly, knock on wood, I would never wish that upon myself, is when people tell me that, I'm like, well, maybe if it was me, then my family would care, or people would stop and listen. So when I think of that, I'm like, I could be Janae, I could be Samantha Brown, I could be Allison, and we could just list survivor after survivor. And it's like, why does it take that? So I appreciate even the fact of you even saying you had to write this book twice and had to get out of that victim mentality, and you wanted to show that there is light at the end of the tunnel. So I appreciate even that aspect of it. And I know that you also have, you're more than just what society tries to label you in this box. And you're more than a veteran, you're more than a mom, you are a warrior, you're a hero, you're courageous, and you've built a brand, and you're building generational wealth right now. And that is such an inspiring thing to see for your daughters as well, is what your story and your mom and the abandonment to now you as a woman today raising your own daughters, and then being able to look at you and say, my mom's a badass, like she's a warrior, she overcame. So you're building strong women as well. So never forget that, or stop and celebrate yourself, because what you're doing really is having a global effect, and it is inspiring so many people across the world. And I want to talk about even first, before we go into like where you are today and transition out of the military, because you've built a perfectly flawed brand, and I want to share that aspect. But what would you say is the biggest misperception about you?
Well, I think that because I take good care of my outward appearance, or I post a lot of pictures, I think the biggest misperception is that I'm, maybe like stuck up or vain or overly concerned with my appearance. Like my nails are not painted, they're not done. I don't go get, any type of Botox or anything like that. So I think there's this perception that I put a lot of money and time into my looks, and I don't. I actually just stick my head down and work all day, every day. And so a lot of the times I don't even get out of my loungewear, because I wake up and I just grind all day long. And I don't think people see that. They see all the results and they think that it comes easy, but it doesn't. It comes at a great, I guess, sacrifice, because I sacrifice, all the time that I could be out having, getting my nails done, getting my hair done, getting massages, going to lunches. I turn down a lot of invites to go places because I have to just work. I'm working. I'm always working. So I think that would be the biggest misperception. And I think that's that misperception. The reason I point that out is because I think that's what lends to a lot of people attacking me online, is that they want to bring me back down. They think that I think more of myself than I really do. And so I think they want to try to bring me back down, but they don't realize that I'm barely building myself up. I'm barely building my self-esteem up. I've already been broken down worse than any of them could break me down. And so Maybe that's why I'm able to withstand some of that adversity online. But when I see them do that, it hurts me more for the other people they do it to. Because I'm like, okay, yes, it hurts sometimes, but for the most part, I'm like, boy, you can't hurt me. You have no idea what I've been through. Trust me. And so sometimes I just laugh at their efforts because I'm like, you think I haven't seen this? I'm 40. Like there's been probably, 1,000 people who have done this same tactic. It is not new. But what breaks my heart is knowing that they're doing that to people who are not prepared to withstand it, or who are still trying to find themselves. And that's why I speak up a lot about it. And that's why you'll see me make kind of satire responses to some of the hate and the bullying that I get, because I want to show the girls who are going through it that these people are nothing. Like, don't let them bother you. You keep doing your thing, keep pressing on, and don't give them the light that they want, because that's what they're trying to get, is attention. So
I love how you show up authentic online, because there's such a facade on social media, and you'll show up with like no makeup, or like, hey, what I look like today, make a video. I love your clapback videos, because like, whatever, throw it at me. Like, here we go. But it's because I love it too, because it's nice to see realness on social media. You don't see that. And you're letting others know, like, hey, you're not alone. Like, if people are clapping back at you, like, you make jokes of it, and you have a different sense of humor. Yeah, it might affect you sometimes, but at the same time, I love how you've also turned that perception and change it, and like, no, I'm going to shift this energy and show like, hey, you can't affect me. Like, I'm comfortable in my own skin, and I know who I am as a person and as a woman, and like, here, respect me. Like, look at my brand. So I love that. And if we can go into sharing your transition out of the military, and because I know you moved from Hawaii and now you're in Texas, and if we could just talk about even you being the chief of Air Force lodging, and then go into the fun stuff in your brand and the fashion line and everything that you do, because you literally have a whole brand.
I do. It's kind of been a crazy, crazy journey. I got out of the Navy in 2008. And so that was right when the recession hit. And I thought that it was going to be an easy transition. We had everything planned out. And I got out in October, and the recession happened right after. So jobs all went away, and I struggled to find a job. I was able to eventually find a position within the government, and I got brought in as a civil service employee. So I worked for the Navy for about 13 years or so. And I was living in Hawaii, and I felt a little bit, so I was already working for the Navy, but I always felt like with my career working for the military, I've had to kind of morph a little bit and suppress the feminine side and the girly side of me, and in order to be respected. And that wasn't a good perception on my part. And so it did kind of hurt me a little, where I was trying to morph into a man, but then I was coming across at work as inauthentic and too aggressive, and I wasn't showing the characteristics that I was supposed to show, right? So I was feeling, there was a stage in my life around 2018 where I was starting to feel like, okay, I have this amazing career. I have this beautiful family. I'm very blessed. I was living in Hawaii paradise, but something still was missing. And it was my ability to just be myself, my goofy, fashion loving self, and super social. And so I got onto social media, and that's where I kind of developed a following online. And I thought it was really cool because I was connecting with a bunch of like-minded people who had similar interests. That's hard to find in person. And so when you get on social media, it's like, wow, I can connect with all these people that like the same things as me and have the same type of sense of humor as me. And so as I started to kind of grow my platform on social media, I thought, well, I always wanted to open a fashion business. I always wanted to share my love for fashion. So I'm just going to give it a try. And I was stable enough with my career that it was a risk I could take financially at that point in my life. So I went ahead and invested. And my husband and I started Perfectly Flawed, my online boutique, which now has well over 2,000 items. I started with 10 items. And that's all I could afford was 10 items. I built my own website. I was doing all of my own procuring and shipping and marketing and financial, everything we were doing ourselves. And we ended up building it. It's been about 3 years. So we built my brand. I got lucky, or maybe I'm just, I had a really great network of women who were like, you know what? I'm excited for you. I want to support this. And they stepped out and they started, buying my clothes and helping to share it with the world and helping to raise awareness. And so that helped me to build my brand as well. And so we were living in Hawaii. I had my business. And then this position here in San Antonio came up for the chief of lodging. And so I applied for it during the pandemic, in the middle of the pandemic, and I ended up getting selected for the position. In the middle of the pandemic, we had to move from Hawaii to here. We had to move all of my inventory over. And I ended up, getting out here and having to kind of rebuild my business because it took a hit during the pandemic. My clothes were initially marketed as like flirty fashion. So it was like stuff that you would wear out to like the club, or you would wear to like a wedding, just cute sundresses, stuff like that. It was like it took more of a flirty, not overly sexy, but just flirty. So there was like some parts covered, some parts not. It was a balance. And during the pandemic, people stopped wearing stuff like that. They all went to leggings and t-shirts and sweatpants. I didn't have that. And so I was like, shoot, So I took a hit during that. I took a hit when I had to close down for the PCS over here. And when I got here to San Antonio and I opened my business back up, I was like, okay, I'm going to go ahead and expand. And so that's where we have about 2,000 different types of clothes. So we've got everything now. I've got stuff for kids and men and purses and shoes. And I even have some houseware. It's been an incredible, incredible journey. Through Perfectly Flawed, I've been able to meet a wonderful community of people. And when we talk about empowering one another, like I believe that community, my Perfectly Flawed community, has been genuinely empowering. Whereas not only do we all uplift one another in embracing the skin we're in and loving ourselves and fully expressing ourselves the way we want to, not the way society says we have to, but we also all truly support one another. We don't bash each other. We don't tear each other down. And when we see one another getting torn down, we all kind of come in to help each other out. So it's been such a pleasure and such a blessing. And then being here as the chief of lodging, it's a great job. It's a great career. I love the team that I get to work with, and I'm getting to go out now and really spend a lot of time with the different staff at different locations. And so I'm incredibly blessed. I have the home I never thought I would have, a swimming pool and just things I could have never imagined for myself when I was living in Hollywood. All I wanted was, a 1-bedroom apartment and food. And I could have never imagined this life for myself. So I'm extremely grateful.
That's amazing. Can you just explain what Perfectly Flawed means to you?
Perfectly Flawed, we're all flawed in our own way. And I feel like once we embrace our flaws as what makes us different, that's what makes us perfect. So we all have something different. We're flawed internally and externally. And if we embrace those instead of trying to hide and suppress those flaws, we let them out. That's what makes us our unique, quirky self. I think that society, everybody's trying to fit into a box. Everybody's trying to look the same and to act the same. And when you embrace what your flaws are, which I think are what make you perfect, then you really stand out. And I love that. And so when I got on social media, I saw Instagram was my first like big social media thing. I saw people were getting bashed in the comments for, they were just kind of being torn down and their flaws were being pointed out. And I was like, well, damn, I'm just going to own it up front. I have flaws. So here it is, and I get made fun of for my big forehead or whatever, being, overweight sometimes. And so I get bashed all the time. And I'm like, I'm going to own it. Yeah. And that's what I love about myself. My forehead, my daughter gave me a hard time the other day because she was like, Mom, you don't understand how much I get made fun of for my big forehead. I'm like, you're beautiful. You have a long face. And she's like, that's not helping. And I'm like, just trying to,
Your mom,
to me,
it doesn't even help. Your mom.
She's like, that did not help. And I'm like, I don't know how else to say it, but I think our growing up, one of my favorite singers, and I talk a lot about her in the book, is Jewel. And Jewel stood out because her teeth were imperfect and she kept them that way. And that was her signature smile. And I thought it was absolutely stunning and beautiful, right? Everybody did. And so if she had tried to change that, she wouldn't be Jewel.
Right. Right.
That's
love
a
it.
great way to explain that. I love it. I think that that's such a good lesson for people because it's like you said, you go on Instagram and you see all these perfect models that have photoshopped themselves and everybody's trying to be that, or they feel very uncomfortable and insecure being themselves because it's like, gosh, well, I'm not that, and what a horrible image and, pattern that we're passing on to children who are going to be coming on these apps and saying, gosh, well, I don't look like that. I'm not good enough. I'm too flawed to be anywhere near perfect, and I love how you're saying, why would you want to be like that? Why would you want to be like everybody else? Not that there's anything wrong with being beautiful, or if you want to be a model, go for it. But, there's such a beauty in saying, what do I have that other people don't?
Yes.
Really externally. And why couldn't that be my superpower, right? That's what makes a superhero is they have a power that nobody else does, or something that they put on, or just something that they have inherently or externally that other people don't. And I think that's such a neat lesson.
That's so well put, where you say, that they have a power that nobody else has. You couldn't have explained it any better. That's absolutely beautiful.
Those filters, like the social media filters, they crack me up because like I do that and I'm like, well, this looks nice, but that's not even my face. Like that's not even what I look like. And there are days where I'm like, yeah, man, I wish I looked like that. And I wish my 42-year-old face had a whole lot less wrinkles and whatever. And there's days I have to remind myself I have wrinkles because I laugh. I have wrinkles because I smile. That's why they're there. And I have to appreciate all the years that I've been through. But we don't do that anymore. We just say, well, that's not what you're supposed to have. And it's like, but I am. That's my life. That's what I've lived. That's what I look like. That's what I look like. Sorry.
I saw a TikTok, I think it was today, about the Kardashians. I don't know if you guys have seen, but I think Kim Kardashian got her BBL removed and she's lost like a ton of weight and she's gone back to like super, super thin. And it's like they've been like the standard for beauty for so long. And somebody pointed out this fact that they have enough money to keep modifying their bodies.
Mm-hmm.
And what they're doing is very dangerous because they're modifying their body. They're creating this new standard of beauty. So all these girls, and it's almost like what she explained it as, the girl who shared the TikTok, was that they want to create a standard of beauty that nobody can afford. Right. And so that's why they got the BBL, because nobody could afford a BBL. So we're all going to have them, and we're going to have these silhouettes that are unrealistic and expensive to achieve. And then when society was able to kind of catch up and people were able to start getting BBLs, they were like, well, that's not unique anymore. So now I'm going to go back to being ultra thin again. And so they got the BBL taken out, which all these girls who got BBLs probably can't afford to go get it taken out now. So they've been like the standard for beauty for so long, but it's just dangerous that people are trying to keep up with that. And it's like a dysmorphia for the girls who can't keep up with it. They feel depressed. They feel like they're not beautiful. And so it's a constant reminder for me, for my daughters, how would I look as a mother if I'm going online and like modifying my looks and my daughters are looking at me at home like, Mom, you don't look like that. Like, how do I explain that to them? Oh yeah, sorry, I, trimmed my waist in and I, changed. My daughters are going to be like, but why would you do that? So how can I teach them to love themselves if I'm not doing that myself? So I hold myself accountable in that way. There's times where I look at myself in clothes and I'm like, oh, I'm bloated, or I feel a certain way. And I'm tempted, and I have to be careful what I say in front of my kids and how I adjust, edit my photos. I'll edit, like I'll brighten my eyes or brighten my, skin a little bit. And I'll explain that to them, that that's just because this is modeling pictures. But anything other than that, like morphing my body, how could I explain that to my children?
Yeah.
I always like the meme when it's, sorry, I always like the meme when it's like, if you ever get lost, no one can find you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, and you see that these days, right? Like you'll see like the missing, when people are sharing posts about missing people or anything like that. And it's like, well, that's a filter. How am I going to find that person? Or you'll see like memorial stuff and it's like a filtered photo. And I'm like, you know, I don't want that for myself. And so nothing against people who do use them, because I mean, I use them every once in a while. I think yesterday I did one to like enhance my makeup a little bit, and I hated the way it looked on me. And I always want to take them down after I post, if I post anything with a filter. Sometimes I'll use the joking ones too. But when that's become like, I think my issue is when it becomes, you can't post a picture without it. That's what worries me. And I see people who use it and they'll use it like with their husband sitting next to them. And it's like, dude, we can see that you have a filter because he doesn't look like that. Or they'll put it on their babies or their children. And that's when it gets a little scary. And so I'm not judging people. I understand that that's just, unfortunately, society is doing that to people. And hopefully we can, you know, just be our perfectly flawed selves and authentic and start to inspire them to kind of come back from that. That's what I would like to see. People to be comfortable and confident in themselves.
100%. And I'm going to show my age here too, but I didn't have technology either growing up. You know, I'm close to 40, I'm 36. So it's like,
you do not look it at all.
you're
Like
so
not even
sweet.
close.
But like going in school, my insecurities came from like, oh my gosh, my hair is just, I come out of the shower and I just let it go. And that girl, I can tell, blow dries her hair. Like, that's pretty cool. Like, oh my gosh, is my hair not good enough because I don't blow dry it? I wasn't sitting here like, oh, how big's my butt? Or how flat is my tummy? You know, and it's so sad that girls are being exposed to that at younger and younger ages. Cause I can't imagine being faced with all of that. It was hard enough growing up as a teenager, you know what I mean? Just with like looking at girls in school and, you know, dealing with boys. But I think part of that, like, it's supposed to be kind of awkward, you know, growing into your hormones and stuff. But then you add in social media, logging on Instagram and being like, gosh, well, my body doesn't look like that, and neither do my friends. How do I look like that? Because that seems to be a look that is very popular from what I see, even though it's not real, right? And so I love that you're able to play around with that and show people what getting dressed up and looking, you know, your best self is, and then also just taking it all off and saying, I don't feel like it today. You know, I think that that sets a really good example. And people, I think it's so ridiculous that people would troll you for looking good or taking care of how you look. Like, you were homeless. I bet you dreamed of days where you could like put a little bit of makeup on your face or like wear a nice dress that you felt beautiful in. You know, people should be so grateful and praising you for that. So I just want to thank you for what you're doing, because you're setting a great example for your kids and being able to moderate that and teach them the right way, you know, what real looks like.
Thank you. I think that we could be attacked either way, right? If I didn't take care of myself, it'd be, oh, she's sloppy, she's lazy. You know, if I do take care of myself, it's like, oh, she's high maintenance, she's materialistic. And so I try to show both, and I tell people I'm going to be whatever I want to be today. And if I want to dress sexy, I'm going to dress sexy. And I don't care that I'm 40 and I'm a mom and a professional. I'm still going to feel good in my own skin, and you don't get to tell me. And that's definitely the example I want to share, is that it doesn't matter if girls are getting, you know, their nails done and their eyelashes and their hair done and all of that. I think that's amazing. I love that for them. I just don't want anyone to feel like they have to do that. Because that's what they're seeing everyone else do. And a lot of the comments that I get are from like older men. And I'm thinking, ew, like, so are you commenting on young girls' photos, telling them like what's pointing out their flaws when, have you seen yourself? You know, like,
right. Like, you're a fat old man.
It's unbelievable. The audacity of some of these people. I'm like, whoa, are you seriously coming after me when you're, you know, not taking care of yourself? Like, that's not fair at all.
Well, he has a lot of money, so he figures you'll just look over that part.
Yeah, of course. Most of them are just basement trolls.
I would say I love that we had that whole conversation, because as mothers and even as women in social media, and there's such a facade and so much, I mean, it takes a lot to be fake and not be yourself. So that part I can't relate to, is because it takes too much work. But I would say for the youth, especially you being an influencer and seeing what is influencing our daughters and the world and society and the pressure and the constant, you have to look like this, or the Kardashians, who are the set image of what to look like. What would you say for anyone? Sorry, Becky, you weren't ready for that. Sorry.
I
So
love all of your words where you just throw stuff off. I didn't hear that one before. That was good.
So for anyone listening, especially being moms to young daughters and you being an influencer, what would you say? Because social media pushes this facade of picture perfect. And you being a mom with young daughters, what would be some advice or a message to the youth and then to women who feel that they have to attain these levels that are not realistic to be accepted or to feel that they're validated?
So I would say this, there have been times where I felt like I had to. And especially when I first got on social media, I started to think like, you know, I was losing a lot of weight. I was feeling like in order to model my clothes, I had to be a certain size. I felt like I wanted to be a model and I had to, you know, lose a lot of, I was nitpicking at everything on myself. And I felt the temptation on many occasions, especially as I started to grow on social media. I started to think like, oh, do I have to be perfect on here? Do I have to have a different image? And what I'll say though is, having experienced kind of the ebbs and flows of social media, my experience is that when you are your real authentic self, you get a better reception from people online than when you are putting on a facade, because people do see right through it. And so they're going to spend a lot of time trying to tear that down and trying to get the real you out. And so I feel like there's freedom in being yourself. There's a lot of freedom and relief in knowing that I don't have to rush in the bathroom and hurry up and put on a full face of makeup to get on social media. I can just get on how I'm feeling and say what I want to say. And then later, if I want to dress pretty, I could dress pretty too. But don't fall, if you have fallen into that, because I don't want to bash anyone who has. If you have fallen into that and you feel like you have to maintain a certain level of an image, it's okay to be yourself, is my opinion. And it's okay to go back from that. And it's even more powerful if you admit that and you come out and say, you know what, for the last couple of years, I have been portraying an image that's not real and it's exhausting. And I just want to be myself and kind of be a little free. I think that you would feel a weight lifted off of your chest, but I think you would also relieve a lot of other people because they'd be like, oh, good, because I want to be myself too. So I see a little bit of a movement. I see that's where TikTok and Instagram are different. So on Instagram, people are still in that mode of I have to be perfect. And for me, I still get, you know, when I post silly stuff on Instagram, people be like, Janae, what are you doing? But when I post it on TikTok, they're like, yeah, that's, you know, that's par for TikTok. That's what we do here. So that's a plus about TikTok. And that's one of the things I like about TikTok is that a lot of people are actually a lot more authentic about how they portray themselves. And they're a little bit more in tune with their goofy side and not always, you know, completely dressed up and dolled up to get online. And a lot of the videos that go viral are usually of people who are not perfectly put together for that reason. Because people will kind of scroll on TikTok and be like, oh, this isn't Instagram. I don't want to see perfect. Oh, there's somebody who's authentic and real. I like that. So I think there is kind of a movement in that direction already. And so I say, everybody jump on that movement of being your just true, authentic self. You'll feel free. You'll feel good. And just embrace your flaws.
Thank you for that and sharing that, because so many people we see all these people who are idolized. And people fall into that, which at sometimes everybody has done that and experienced that. And even especially from, I would say men and women, because especially right now, the guys are getting attacked with masculine. So I would say we often don't talk about and be vulnerable, and we don't share the mental health and the dark side of that. And even like if you are getting injections or BBL, all of that, people don't admit that. And then they'll like use a diet or something to cover it, which causes a huge risk at later down the road, because if there is health issues and everybody is different. So I love that you share that and that aspect of it, because most people don't look at it from that perspective of what could happen later on and how could this affect my mental health. If you had the world's attention for 30 seconds, what would you say?
I would say be your own hero. No one is coming to save you, and you're going to have to step up and be your own hero. And I say that, I say, that doesn't mean that people don't want to help you. And just like we're doing, it doesn't mean that we shouldn't try to help others. But everybody's going through their own thing. Just like you said, everybody has their own trauma or their own situations. And so some people just may not be capable of helping you, or they may not know how they can help you. And so you have to be prepared to step in, help yourself and save yourself, and not get stuck in the victim mindset.
Thank you so much for taking the time to jump on this podcast and share all of you with us openly, authentically, and just being you and being a powerful voice for the voiceless. For all of our listeners, if you can share where to find you on social media, as well as where to buy this shirt and your book. I'll be a little Vanna White right now as you share all of this.
You're a perfect model. Thank you. So you can find me all over social media at Janae Perfectly Flawed. And my book is available on Amazon, or you can go directly to my site, which is perfectlyflawedbook.com. And that's where you can get an autographed copy of the book. You can get the Amazon link, or you can get the hero merch.
Or you could just buy the bundle.
Yes. And I do have a bundle, an autographed book, which comes with a shirt, a bookmark, and a pen for $50.
Amazing. Is there anything that you're currently working on, or anything that is coming up that people can look forward to too?
So coming up is really just getting out and speaking more. So that's where I've been lately. I did my first speech this weekend, and just getting out and sharing my story in person and meeting with people and getting to know people. I'm loving it. It's been such a great experience.
I love that, and I wish you nothing but success. Again, so proud of you and everything that you've accomplished, you've overcome, and I cannot wait to see what the future has in store for you. If there's anything else you would like to share, the platform is yours to share whatever else, the last minute messages before we lead into wrap up.
I just want to say again, thank you guys for having me. Most importantly, thank you for what you have dedicated your lives to, because it's your message of saving our children is exactly, it aligns with what I feel we need to be sharing. And, but I know it's not an easy message to share. So I just want to thank you ladies for doing that and for giving me an opportunity to share my story on your platform.
So much love and respect, and we're honored and definitely look forward to more conversations with you. Expect to see a lot more with Janae. You'll also see other survivors that she'll be connecting with, and just continuing to grow the community and supporting one another. So honored to have you. And for those listening, when you stop and listen and say, when does this stop? Change begins with awareness. When each and every single one of us have the courage to stop looking away and turning a blind eye. You don't get to look away on this issue. Human trafficking is a $150 billion industry. We have no future if we don't protect our children. We have a duty to protect the innocent. If we don't, that blood is on our hands. Everyone has a story. Together, we must rise for the children and for humanity. It starts with one person. It starts with you. Embrace you. We all have a story. You are not alone. Be bold, be you, be your own kind of beautiful. Stand tall, speak your truth, and the world will adjust. Know that they cannot take your voice. I pray that this message inspires you and God gives you faith to stand in your truth and gives you strength and helps you find your voice to share that truth and inspire just that one person. It's never too late to do what's right. Survivors, you are not alone. We hear you, we see you, we stand by you. Sending love, light, and blessings. we will be the generation to end human trafficking. Enough is enough. It's time. No one is coming to save you. Be your own hero, as Janae Sergio constantly says. Love, the imagination, Save Our Children podcast, and Janae, sending you so much love and thank you for all the love and support.